So excise duty is basically a tax that is a consumption tax.
Okay.
On the items specified under the first schedule of the Excise Duty Act.
All right, thank you. Thank you for that. You've even preempted what I was going to ask next, because now we are wondering, what are these excisable goods and services? You have mentioned a couple of them. I don't know whether you have more examples that you would want to share with us.
Yeah, sure. I can add on to the list. For the services, one is something we do day to day, the phone calls that we are always making. And for the goods, we have tobacco, we have mineral water, and beverages, whether imported or locally produced. And also we have excise duty charged on cosmetics. So of us who love cosmetics like lipsticks and the likes, those ones are listed in the first schedule, and they are excisable. Also, motor vehicles are also excisable. And to mention, excise duty is charged on goods that are considered luxurious. Otherwise, goods that the countries of the same, and such include gaming activities, cigarettes that are harmful to our health, and such like items. So, yeah.
Thank you. Let me just ask, is that why it's called a sin
Nutshell,
tax?
those are just some examples.
Thank you. Thank you
Come
so
again,
much, Anita. With the examples that you have given, is that why it's called sin tax?
Probably yes and no. I would say the syntax, I don't know where it originated from. But if you look at the reasoning behind why excise duty is charged on those items that are considered to be put under category of sin tax, you'll find that the intention of the government is actually very, very good. It's basically to protect the society.
Thank you so much. That is very clear. I want to rope in now, Madam Elena, to just continue with this conversation. We now have an understanding of what excise duty is, and we have examples of what some of these excisable goods and services are. So for a Kenyan or a taxpayer out there who perhaps is dealing with the bottled water, dealing with the cosmetics that Madam Jacinita has just mentioned, or even the alcoholic beverages, if they want to deal with these goods, what is the procedure? And I think we will begin from the point of applying for the excise license. Elena, you can take it up from here.
Okay, so the process of applying for a license, first of all, we have two categories of these, rather groups of people, or rather taxpayers. We have the manufacturers dealing with these accessible goods, and also importers. And so for manufacturers, we issue excise licenses, and for the importers, we register them. And so we issue import certificates. We also have people dealing with accessible goods as raw material to produce non-accessible goods. And so for those people, we also register them, but the registration is manual as opposed to the other two that we do online through our iTax Auto. I don't know if that answers the question.
Yes, thank you. It does. It does. You have talked about those manufacturers of excisable goods, the importers, and also those who deal with the last bit that you have talked about, whose process is a bit manual. Why don't we look at them like each individually? Let's begin with those manufacturing excisable goods. Yeah, those manufacturing excisable goods. So how an example and give us an overview of how the the licensing process is like.
Okay. So we do have a list of requirements that the taxpayers need to submit. Um, and first of all, let me say we have two groups of the goods. We have the goods that we consider high risk in terms of taxes, and then the low risk. So the high risk goods in this, we will look at alcoholic products. So anything to do with spirits, beer, wines, and ready to drink. Ready to drink alcohol is your guarana, ciders, and stuff like that. Then you also have tobacco products. So for tobacco products, we have the cigarettes, we have the nicotine pouches, we have the cigars and cigarillos. And so for application of this product, the application is done online through our iTax portal. The taxpayer will log into their iTax account, and if it is an individual trading with a business name, then it will be their personal iTax account, that is the APIN. And then if it is a company, you use the company iTax account, which is the PPIN. Go to registration, and registration, you'll find other registration. Then you select what you're registering for. If you're a manufacturer, you will select the excise license. If you're an importer, you'll select the import certificate. And then the details you need to fill and submit. Now, once you submit that, there's the acknowledgement receipt you get after submitting that you will attach to a list of other documents, such as the certificate of registration or certificate of incorporation, your tax compliance, because we need to know that you are compliant, you're a compliant taxpayer. You're standing with your banks, so your bank account. Introduction from the bank, we don't necessarily want to see your bank balances, but that you have a bank account that is in good standing. Now, we also deal with other agencies that you need to clear with before we can issue you with a license, because we come at the tail end. We have your KEBS, you have to clear with KEBS, they have to certify the goods are good for human consumption. You have to clear with county government has to allow you to do business. For alcoholic products, you have to clear with NACADA. For tobacco products, you have to clear with Ministry of Health, because they have their requirements that that have to be met before we can issue, before they can allow you to even sell the products. And after you submit it, are we okay?
Yes, we are okay. We are okay. Please proceed.
Okay. So after submitting all these documents to KRA, the KRA officers will review them. And after reviewing, they will visit your premises. One, to just ascertain that you actually do have a premise for this business, and you meet some of our requirements. Of course, the premises have to be secure, because the products you're dealing with, or the type of products you're dealing with. And once you meet all that, we will issue you with your license. Let me just talk about the fee for that. We do have a license fee for manufacturers of the high risk products is 100,000. For the low risk products is 50,000. So the low risk products, we are looking at the bottled water, we're looking at soft drinks, we're looking at cosmetics, food supplements. Yeah.
Okay, right. Thank you. Thank you. That is quite informative. I want to also bring in Josinita at this point, just to continue with the conversation. Now that we're talking about what is required for those that are interested in dealing with these excisable goods, you've talked about the high risk and the low risk goods and what it entails in terms of the registration process. Josinita, you have experience well over 16 years in these matters. When we talk about, and I just want to rope in a question at this point, I know we will take questions at the end of this. But just to add to what Eleanor has talked about, what are some of the other requirements? She talked about accreditation by other bodies apart from KRA, but you can continue and give us an overview of the expectations in as far as the registration are concerned, just in continuation to what Eleanor has talked about, and then we'll come and take a quick question.
Okay, largely she has covered majority of what is required, but maybe just to add, there are some other requirements that are expected as per the excise regulations, and some of them are, when you're applying to the commissioner, you're also expected as a licensee to ensure that you give a plan of the premises, how it is it's laid out. The person is also expected to have all the fixtures in terms of the plant equipment laid down. As you've seen, majority of these excisable items, some of them include liquors and liquid stuff. For those producing liquid stuff, they are expected to have, if it's piping, it must be piped in such a way that it is continuous and such that there is no disconnection that somebody can make and out. Such facilities must also be accessible to KRA, and it must be easy for KRA to be able to look into the operations of the licensed premises, or the premises once it's licensed. The other thing is there are some requirements on colors on the pipes, depending on what you're producing. So these colors also must be adhered to. It's a must that you be also tax compliant before you go ahead to do this application. So all these items are listed on the excise regulations, and which is actually easily accessible and also available on the KRA website if somebody needs to just confirm. And also maybe just to mention, from a taxpayer perspective, if you find it hard to get the requirements, if you log into KRA or rather go to KRA websites, all these requirements are listed somewhere and you'll be able to find them up and before you make the registration. Otherwise, it is as she has enlisted, and just those few that I'm able to add. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you so much. I want to appreciate our panelists. We keep the conversation going. I can see for those of our participants here, Walter, you have raised your hand together with PC. PC, I'm not sure what your full name is. Is it that you have a question? Maybe you can just comment on the chat box so that I know. I also want to encourage us, even as we continue with the conversation, please channel your questions to the chat box, the Q&A section, and we for sure indeed are going to take your questions. I just want to read out one so that our panelists can prepare to respond to this at the end of our discussion. An anonymous attendee has asked a question to do with excise taxes that are applicable specifically for a Toyota Hiace van. The attendee wants to know which HS code is applicable. I hope Elena and Josinita, you can see the question in the QA section. He also wants to know which Toyota Hiace van, that a Toyota Hiace van imported with 2 or 6 fitted seats is under which HS code, and what are the excise taxes applicable? What are the excise taxes applicable? I want to thank those of us that are also telling us where they are following us from. I acknowledge Tiberius Muhindi, who's joining us from Isuzu East Africa Limited. Thank you very much. I hope the audio is clear now. We have adjusted our audios. I hope you can get us clearly. I want to pick this conversation up now with, because before I come to you, Elena, Josineta, just quickly mention to us the computation of excise duty. How is it calculated? What is the percentages? When should it be remitted? Josineta?
Okay. Excise duty will be remitted at different level for different activities. And I'll go first with when it should be remitted for goods supplied or rather produced in Kenya. So for manufacturers of excisable goods, excise duty becomes due when these goods are removed from the excise, or rather the licensed plant or premises, or they are consumed in that facility. So at that point, the taxes become due. For excisable services, the tax point or the point at which excise becomes due is the earlier of the supply of the excisable services, the issuance of the invoice for the excisable services, or the payment for the excisable services. So whichever occurs earlier of the three, that is the taxing point when it comes to services. For imported goods, the excisable point or the tax point for those goods is the clearance with customs department. That is when you import the goods before they are cleared, either through the port of Mombasa or through the airport or at the border stations. That is the point at which you must pay those taxes. So different items are charged different tax rates, and these are available on the first schedule of the Excise Act. I'll not go into listing of each one of them because they are quite, but maybe just to mention on the rates, there are some items that are charged specific tax rate, and specific means they are charged per unit. A good example is on alcohol. The rate is charged per liter, and for different types of alcohols, the rate will vary as listed in the Excise Act. For imported goods also, some are charged at 25, others would be charged specific duty rate. So those tax rates are all listed under the Excise Act. So we would assist with giving more details if we could get the specific items, because the list is quite long for us to give the specifics. And maybe just to mention, for motor vehicles, depending on the engine capacity of the car, different motor vehicles are charged different excise duty rates, and also depending on the fuel that is used on those motor vehicles. So the tax rate for excise can be either specific or ad valorem. So for ad valorem means it's charged a certain percentage of the value, or specific, that is a certain value per unit. Hope that's clear.
Yes, yes, it is very clear. You've talked about the two rates, the specific rate or the ad valorem rate. Would you want to just expound a bit on the ad valorem rate, even as we prepare to have Eleanor join us in this conversation?
Okay, for the ad valorem rate, it means, and I'll give an example with imported goods. If you import certain goods, those goods have a particular value attached to them, and that is what is called customs value actually. And for ad valorem, it means a certain rate, let's say like 20% of the value is applied as the tax rate. I don't know whether Brenda, I could go ahead and maybe elaborate, or that's
Yes. Yes, yes, just for the purpose of our listeners so that they can know the difference between the specific rate and the ad valorem rate.
Okay, so as I've said, specific would be charged a certain rate per unit. For cigarettes, it's per what is called per mule. For alcohol, it's per liter. For things like cosmetics, when they're imported, they are charged ad valorem. That means a specific rate on the value. So for example, you'll find some are charged at 25%, others are charged at 35%. So depending on the item you're bringing, you need to be keen on the tax rate. But the good thing is when you launch your declarations with KRA, the systems are clearly, or rather they are nicely done in a way that the system calculates the tax rates for you. However, it is always good for you as a taxpayer to know what is the rate, and especially for your planning purposes. It's always very important for you to plan for your taxes so that you're not caught off guard by being told you're supposed to pay maybe 2 million, you didn't plan accordingly. So it's always good to be aware of the tax rate that is applicable before the goods are imported, or actually before you start the manufacturing process, so that you can plan accordingly. If it's making provisions for taxes that fall due in the near future, then you plan accordingly for such taxes.
Thank you. Thank you. It is very clear to us. The specific is a specific rate and the ad valorem is a percentage. Elena, let's just continue. Now that we know about these different rates, let's talk about ITA. Is there an excise duty return? And if so, how is this return? How do taxpayers go about in terms of declaration on the iTax portal? Elena?
Oh, okay, okay. First, I maybe to add on to something.
Yes.
If you can go back to the registration process. Another requirement I actually totally forgot. For manufacturers, they need to submit an excise security bond for protection of excise, and so for alcohol, tobacco, the minimum required is 1.25, 1,250,000, and for other products is 125. However, the commissioner can change that depending on your compliance, and also the risk that is there. So you get, like, for spirit, people who deal with spirits, you could the bond value could go up from the 1.25. The other thing I need to add is, like, if you are a manufacturer of alcohol, you cannot import import raw spirit. Raw spirit is a raw material for the final product. So you cannot import raw spirit unless you are licensed as a manufacturer of excisable excise product. So let's say EABL wants to import raw spirit, they need to be registered as a manufacturer of of a spirit or alcoholic product for them to be allowed to bring in the product,
Okay.
the raw material. To some other products that are at vulnerable rates, I need maybe just to add on that, we have the jewelry, and then we have cosmetics. That the rate currently is 15%, jewelry and cosmetics. Now, on to filing your excise tax returns. The only people who can file the excise return are the manufacturers, because they are once you're licensed, you get the excise duty obligation. For importers, once you pay your duty while clearing with customs, that is the final. You will not be required to file your return. So once you're licensed as a manufacturer, you get the excise obligation. Of course, the process of filing your return, go to iTax, you'll download the template for filing. You key in the details. The rates are input there. With your excise license number, the template will pick the rate that applies for the product you're filing for. You are allowed to claim raw material, accessible raw material, to reduce your tax due. So basically, if you bought a raw spirit, and you produced a whiskey, then you can, because raw spirit is accessible, you can claim that to reduce as a credit to reduce your tax due. What is not allowed is packaging materials that are accessible. Like when we had plastic that was accessible, you cannot claim that, because does not go into the production of the product, but it's a packaging material, so it is not allowed. Or same applies to airtime. Bank charges that are accessible, those are not allowed as an input in the excise duty return. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for even the additional information that you have given us, putting examples of even the accessible goods that fall under the ad valorem rate, and also expounding more to us even about the bond, and also talking about how to file the excise duty return. I want to still on you, Elena, just let's continue talking about those that fail to file their returns. When is this return due? And those that fail to file this return by the due date, are there any penalties that are applicable to them?
Yeah, the due date for this is just like VAT, because actually most of the accessible goods are okay, not most, all the accessible are also VATable. So if you, again, for registration of VAT, you will need to meet that threshold of the 5 million, or you volunteer to register for VAT. So the due date for that is the 20th of every month, of the subsequent month. And payment is due also on the 20th of the subsequent month. The penalty is same as VAT for 10,000 or 1%, whichever is higher, of the tax due, whichever is higher.
Okay, okay. All right, thank you. Thank you so much, Elena. Let me just bring in Josinita there. Elle has mentioned something interesting about the accessible goods and services also being VATable, or VAT being applicable to them. We just want to bring in a bit of a VAT conversation into this as well. Josinita, for those that, to the benefit of our listeners, VAT, what is it? And who qualifies to register for VAT? Let's take a bit of a detour and then we'll come back to excise. What is this VAT and who qualifies for it?
Okay. Thanks, Brenda. So VAT and in full is a value added tax, and it's an indirect tax that is charged on value addition on goods or services that are provided in Kenya. It's an indirect tax charged at several rates within the jurisdiction of Kenya. It could be charged at the standard rate, that is 16%. Could be charged at 8% for petroleum products, certain petroleum products, not all. And then could be charged at 0% or what we call zero rated VAT rate. Then we have the exempt goods. Who qualifies to register for VAT? As required by law, anybody who does business in Kenya and is expecting or has a turnover of 5 million is expected by the commissioner to register for VAT purposes. Otherwise, the commissioner does not restrict voluntary registration. But this comes with an obligation at the end of each month for you to file your VAT returns. So it's good for someone to be careful when registering for VAT purposes because it comes with obligations and there are fines and penalties for you to fail to file your returns. So it is important if you meet the threshold for you to register. Again, it is an offense for you not to register if you qualify. Is that
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you for that. Still done on iTax. I don't know whether you would also want to touch on penalties, if any, that are applicable.
Yes. Luckily enough, and we really must applaud KRA for the good work they're doing. They are making our work easy. Some of these functions you can do while seated at the comfort of your home. You just log onto iTax, and I want to believe that every Kenyan has a PIN. So you just log on to your iTax and do an upgrade. I would say an upgrade kind of, because if you're already registered as a taxpayer, you're just adding the obligation of VAT, and it's a easy guided steps in iTax. So you fill in the required information, attach the documents that are required as guided by the system. Some of the documents that are maybe required would be things to do with matters relating to your company and then other information that the commissioner may request.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I want us to continue with our conversation. Let me appreciate those of us that are really engaging us on the chat box. We have a number of questions that we'll be responding to shortly, but this conversation cannot end without us touching on EGMS. EGMS. Josinata, I know you've just come from speaking to us, but let me bring you back on just to touch on EGMS. What is EGMS? Yeah.
Thanks, Brenda. EGMS is a system that was introduced a few years back by KRA to ease way of monitoring excise activities across the country. It's an easy to use system, and it has benefits to both the manufacturer and the Kenya Revenue Authority.
Okay. And in full, what does it stand for? I want us to delve into it a bit so that we can look at matters to do with the affixing of excise terms. Give us an overview of how EGMS works in as far as the manufacturers and importers are concerned.
Okay, EGMS in full is a Excisable Goods Management System. And as I've said, it was introduced a few years ago by Kenya Revenue Authority. The system is usually interconnected with the manufacturer systems for purposes of monitoring the production.
Yes, Josinita, you can. Yes, we can hear you now. We can hear you now. Please proceed.
Yeah.
Yes, even as Josinita is joining us to just continue with this conversation on EGMS. Elena, let me just rope you in quickly. There's a question here by Jacob Musila. He's asking about exemptions in as far as excisable goods are concerned. Would you want to touch on that? Even as she joins us to answer that question, I think Timu Hindi, who
Thanks, Brenda.
Yes.
I don't know if
can hear you loud and clear.
I don't know if Josinita is still on, or I can actually do some of.
Yes.
All right.
Yes. She's still on. We are getting her
Just
back.
before I take the okay, so just before I take the question, maybe let me just answer the question why EGMS that you had
Please.
asked
Yes.
earlier.
Yes.
So EGMS was, as she explained, it's an accessible good management system that was introduced to mainly for track and trace, and also for accountability. And so we introduced this to try and combat dumping and illicit trade, both by importers and manufacturers. Our compliance teams at the TSOs use this to do their compliance check. So if you're in production, the stamp is used to calculate the taxes that we expect as KRA, and so that was for compliance, tax compliance. We also did that to improve enforcement by KRA and other stakeholders and the public. So if we can go back to the question, what was the question again?
Yes. Thank you for continuing with the conversation on EGMS. And just before I get to the question, I don't know whether Josinita, you're with us. You can hear us clearly.
Yes, I can hear you now. Sorry, my network
No problem.
issues. I had to change. Apologies about that.
No problem. It happens. And let's just continue with Josinita a bit on EGMS before we now switch to the Q&A, the questions. You were talking to us about EGMS. Maybe you can discuss a bit about excise stamps, a fixation of the excise duty stamp. Josinita?
Okay. The law requires that or rather the licensed manufacturers or importers of accessible goods to affix revenue stamps on those items. And these items are available from Kenya Revenue Authority. They are purchased and affixed to some of these items. For those manufacturers who are in Kenya, these stamps actually are expected to be affixed on the product before as it leaves the plant. What am I saying? As the company produces the goods as they run through the production line. The manufacturers are expected to have a system in such a way that as the item leaves the plant to the packaging area, then the specific or the stamp that is required to be affixed is affixed before that item is packaged or rather stored in their premises. So that should be done and complied with, and the excise stamps fees, or rather the purchase rate, has been constant for the larger part of the excise duty taxes in Kenya. But there are emerging issues that taxpayers need to be aware of. There are several changes that have been not effected, but are under review, that when they come into effect, then they will change a few things when it comes to excise rates. Because different items will require excise stamps affixed on them that are charged at different rates. So this is an area that as taxpayers we need to be keen on. Maybe just to mention, the excise stamps have special security features, and this is also an area that every Kenyan should be aware of, because these features enable you as a taxpayer, as the tax collector, as the tax, or rather the item consumer, to be aware of, because it will enable you to differentiate what is not right, or rather what is could be fake or counterfeit in the market. We need to be aware of this, and luckily enough, KRA has also come up with a system of you being able to look at those stamps and confirm if they are genuine. So amongst the many advantages of the EGMS system is the fact that as a consumer of the products, you're able to check for yourself. As the taxpayer, you are able to confirm whether the products that are in the market, they actually originated from your plant. So these excise stamps are required to be affixed in particular way that is conspicuous and that are easily traceable for purposes of maybe confirmation on whether they are genuine by Kenya Revenue Authority or actually by the manufacturer themselves. I don't know whether Brenda have answered your query. Maybe there's something you need to expand on.
Yes, you have. You have. At least our taxpayers and our listeners have an idea of what the excise stamps are and why they are necessary. And just when you pointed out that they can actually verify the authenticity of the stamps, that is very good information for them. Wow, how time flies when you're having a good conversation. I want to not forget our listeners. We have quite a number of questions to attend to, and I think we will make time to attend to all of them as much as possible. So kind of just allow me to direct the questions to our panelists. Let's begin with the very initial question that came in.
Brenda.
Yes. Yes, Elle, please continue.
Just before we go that, I think it's important we go there. I think it's important that we talk about the registration of or how you acquire the stamps, because we are talking of affixing and what we are doing it for, but we need them for, but we are not talking about how the taxpayer can acquire the same. So if you allow me.
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, so for you to be able to get the excise stamps, you need to be again registered manufacturer, a licensed manufacturer, and registered importer. Once you get the license or the import certificate, you will now go to our EGMS office. They are located the customer care desk is at Times Tower, ground floor, where they will create an account for you, where you can be able to now make orders of the stamps and also do the accounting and make payments for the stamps. The help desk takes you through the process of ordering for the stamps, making a forecast, because you're required to make a forecast so that we can plan ahead as KRA to be able to get these products from our service providers. So you are allowed to forecast for 6 months, and then they will show you how to make orders of the stamps. They will show you how to do the activation of the stamps, and now how you can use that information to even file your excise duty return. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. That's very important information. In fact, really good information. We then perhaps before we go to the question, let's just exhaustively cover any emerging issue at this point. Justinata?
Okay.
Any emerging the excise and also VAT that you'd want to mention at this point?
Okay, thanks, Brenda. I think as taxpayers, it's always important for you to be keen, especially on your area of operation. If you are affected by VAT, you need to be keen on the emerging issues. If you're operating in an arena where you deal with excise tax matter or items that are excisable, you need to be keen on emerging issues. And just as I've mentioned, KRA just 2 weeks ago was advertising for public participation on changes that are going to be made on the excise regulation. So this is an emerging issue that we need to be keen on because definitely it's going to affect us in one way or another. Maybe you may be required to pay more taxes. Maybe it could be procedural issues that have changed that you need to comply with. There could be a tax saving. It's not always that when there are changes in taxes that it's always a raise. So it's always important for you to pay keen attention when it comes to those emerging issues. I'm sure drafts are available somewhere you could have a look at. Otherwise, if you do not have the draft, KPMG would gladly share that with you to be able to keep abreast with the changes that are coming in that arena. For VAT emerging issues, one of the issues that I would point out is VAT on exported services. This was introduced last year, that is in June. And it was applicable come 1st of July. It's an interesting arena because VAT is supposed to follow the destination principle, but otherwise in Kenya, as a taxpayer, if you offer taxable or VAT-able services exported, you are expected to pay VAT on that. There was a case just the other day that was concluded. So that is an area that we need to keep an eye on to see how the legal landscape will look like eventually on that matter. And then there is introduction of VAT for digital services. Again, an area that you need to be keen on, because there could be areas you think they are not digital, but from the definitions and how the law is constructed, they could fall under digital services. So it's an area that we need to be keen on so that we ensure that we pay what is due, not a shilling less, not a shilling more. Another area of interest or an emerging issue is VAT on sale of commercial properties. There is an ongoing case, and the interesting part is land is not VATable. But when it comes to what is the definition of land? It includes land and any buildings or whatever is on top of it. So it's an interesting area of conversation around VAT. So it's an area that we would wish to keep an eye on and ensure that once it's completed or it's concluded, then we need to comply with. Otherwise, businesses may need to prepare accordingly and make provisions where possible to prepare just in case they would be required to pay taxes in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Josinita. Thank you for that. Now, Elle, let me come to you on any emerging issues that you might want to touch on before we go to the questions.
Yes, thanks. I was hoping Josinita was going to talk about this, but I might as well. We now have this new product that's coming into the market, powdered beer, which is actually captured in the Excise Duty Act. However, we have not had it since 2015, but we are now noticing the product in the market. It might pass as unga feed or a byproduct of unga, but one of the processes that go through for it to become potent and be served as an alcoholic beverage is that water is added into the water is added and the product will sit for about 24 hours, and then now we have our beer. So we are encouraging anyone dealing with such products, please, to visit our offices to be licensed so that we don't have any enforcement issues with them or compliance issues. I think the rest just need to actually tackle. So yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Powdered beer. All right. Something new to learn today. Thank you very much, Elle and Josinita, for the very engaging discussion. Let us now give this time over to our listeners and our taxpayers to ask their question. Number one question, chose not to give the name, but Josinita, let me just ask you to please respond to this where you're able to. What excise taxes are applicable for Toyota Hiace van, HS code applicable, and finally, Toyota Hiace van imported with 2 or 6 fitted seats is under which HS code. Finally, what excise taxes are applicable?
Okay. For motor vehicles, different excise rates are applicable depending on the CC or the engine capacity and also the fuel that is used. So for motor vehicles that are below 1500 cc, the applicable excise duty is 20%. And maybe just to give a brief on how you arrive at getting to know exactly the value of excise duty that you're expected to pay. When you import items, you are expected as a taxpayer to declare to customs what is called the customs value. And the customs value includes what we would call the transaction value. That is the price paid or actually payable to the exporter of those goods. Added to that could be if the goods are coming through the sea, for you to get customs value, you add to the transaction value, you add the freight, bringing those goods into Kenyan territories, and the insurance or the marine cover. Those 3 components give you the basic customs value. Otherwise, as provided under the 4th schedule of East Africa Customs Management Act, there are several other things you need to consider. Things that could form part of customs value, others do not form part of customs value. So it's good for you to be keen on what you're declaring to KRA, rest when the goods arrive and fines or penalties apply if there is anything that you have not complied with. So to To arrive at excise duty, first you compute the import duty that is applicable, and for a total years, definitely it would be at 25% import duty, because I'm assuming in this case it is assembled. Otherwise, if it was not assembled, the excise duty would be at 0. The import duty would be at 0%. So for you to calculate excise duty on an imported assembled gears would be the customs value plus import duty, that is at 25%. Then you apply the applicable rate for excise duty. So for different CCs, as I've mentioned, the excise duty would be different. I'm assuming these years could be only 2,000 and above CC. So if it is between 2,000 and 2,500 and it uses petrol, the excise duty would be at 25%. But otherwise, if it is above 25 for diesel, then excise duty of 35% would apply. If the motor vehicle uses petrol and the CC is above 3,000 engine capacity, then excise duty of 35% would apply. So for the classification, I would refer the taxpayer who has asked the question to tariff line 702, because the specific tariff will be dependent on the seating capacity of the motor vehicle. So from chapter 702, you would be able to get the specific classification of that item.
Thank you. Very well elaborated. Our anonymous attendee, there is your response. I want to now bring in Elle to continue. The anonymous, no, now we have Jacob Mastila with a question. You can also weigh into the previous question if you want. The question is where exemption, okay. He wants to know about matters to do with exemptions and excisable goods. Would you want to touch on that?
The exemption of excisable goods, and I think the same for VAT, this is done by Treasury. However, it is a recommendation from Treasury to us. KRA will process the certificate, but the recommendation will come from Treasury. However, they can visit our exemptions office on 15th floor of Times Tower for more on that.
All right, thank you. Thank you. Josinita, let me bring you in with the next question. Is excise duty on jewelry payable on import by businesses with an excise license or payable by all individuals if they import jewelry? This is Bilal Musani. Yes, Bilal Musani.
Okay, interesting question there. Cross-border trade is one interesting area, and it doesn't just apply to people who are coming in to resell, or rather maybe it doesn't apply to only retailers or wholesalers of such goods, but applies to anybody who imports any item into this country. I would say, and the East Africa Customs Management Act and the regulations, there are a few concessions that are given to individuals if you are to travel outside the country and import certain goods, or rather when you're coming back into the country, import or come with certain goods that maybe are meant for personal use, but there are limitations onto the quantities that you're supposed to come with, not only just quantity, but also the values of those items. For example, there are concessions onto the maybe the alcohol that you could come with at a certain value. But when it comes to taxation, if you import something and it doesn't fall within the items that are allowable when you're coming back into the country, that you are expected to pay the taxes at the same rate as the person who is coming in to resell. Just to mention, the CET, or the Common External Tariff, it applies to any item that is supposed to be coming into the Kenya, unless there are exemptions onto that. So either exemptions that are conferred through the East African Customs Management Act, or any other law that could be applicable in our country.
Thank you, Jacinita. Thank you very much for that response. Elle, let me bring you in with a question from our anonymous attendee. The question is, it's a concern for this person, asking Kenya Revenue Authority basing its decision in respect. Why is KRA basing its decisions in respect to excise duty paid by a manufacturer to the production value of the goods produced, and not of the goods that are removed from the manufacturer's factory? Yes.
I'm not sure I'm understanding the question. Rather, I think this is how I understand.
Yes.
Is this manufacture of goods that have stamps applied, and so the compliance done shows this is how much we are supposed to have received in terms of excise duty, but you have filed your return indicating what you sold, what has left the excise stockroom. I'm going to answer it that way. That is how I understand. So I'm assuming this is somebody who has activated the stamps, and you've done your TSO, or your account manager at KRA has done a compliance check, and there's an amount that is expected. However, you did not sell all of your goods. The excise duty return allows for you to input goods that closing stock, goods that have not left your premises. You have manufactured, you have affixed your stamps, you have activated the stamp, and from our end, we are expecting this amount of revenue. However, these goods have not yet left the premises. So in the excise duty return, you will indicate the closing stock that will reduce your tax due. So that if I'm reviewing that and I can see in your return you have indicated this is how much that was left in my store from the last month's production, then that value will tally.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that response. I think we are on to the last question now. I want to turn it over to Jacinita. Shadrach has a concern in terms of the charging of excise duty on services. He says, why charge excise duty when sending money from M-Pesa to bank, and then charge the same from bank to M-Pesa? Isn't that an aspect of double taxation?
Okay, a very interesting conversation there. I would wish Elena also to weigh in, because when you look at that transaction, it's basically actually the same transaction that is being taxed at those 2 points, if I've understood the question very well. However, this is done in line with the provisions of the law. So remember, KRA is an law enforcement agency and enforces the law the way it is. I would wish to answer this question is to say this. As a Kenyan, you have the opportunity to change the laws of the land where you feel that there is unfairness that is happening. And the government gives us an opportunity every year to make proposals on the changes that you feel warrant to be changed in the law. Either adding on to taxes. For example, if you find there is an area that the society is being affected, you could recommend some introduction of excise duty to curb that activity, or rather that activity that could be affecting the society. So I would urge the taxpayer to always be keen on what you're paying and what the law says, at the same time, make proposals where you feel you're being taxed unfairly. Otherwise, I would ask Elena to weigh in on that.
Thank you so much. Elena, just weigh in on this, even as I ask our panelists to prepare now to make their closing remarks.
I agree with Justinita on this one. We are actually just enforcers of the law. But if I look at it, these are two different transactions. It's not one continuous transaction. And so from my personal, this is personal, I don't think that is actually double taxation. But yeah, I do agree with Josinita when these public participations are called upon. It is I would encourage the public to attend and give their views so that they can be considered. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much for your feedback. Thank you for responding to the questions. Thank you for the very engaging session today. I am certain that for our taxpayers and our listeners, wherever they are, it has been fruitful. They have learned something. I want to welcome Josinita to take the stage now and just give her as our closing remarks. We have had a wonderful time with you today, Josinita.
Okay, first it's to appreciate our taxpayers for joining us and listening to us, and also to appreciate KRA for this opportunity for us to have this engagement. My plea to our taxpayers is that excise duty is a very interesting area, and there's several areas of contention when it comes to excise duty. And this is demonstrated through the many cases that are ongoing in the judicial area. So I would wish to urge us as Kenyans to be keen when it comes to these tax laws, understand what is expected of you and comply accordingly, because not only do you incur financial dent when you are faced with penalties and fines that are followed when you don't comply, but also there is issues to do with the reputation to your company, and also this would eventually cost you some clients, because where we are at an era of self-declaration where our customers are self-aware and they are willing to deal with only those people who are compliant. So it's always good to keep engaging and getting to understand what is happening in the tax arena for you to be able to continually comply and also prepare accordingly for any changes that are coming. For you to be able to plan for tax, you really need to know exactly what is happening and actually also be keen on the emerging issues. At KPMG, we are always ready to help you with these things to plan for tax purposes, assist you with where there are knowledge gaps. We are always publishing several releases when it comes to tax matters. For example, we have what we call the Tax Thursdays, where we are always releasing tax briefs. So keep an eye on our page and we'll keep you informed on changes on the tax area. And also we could assist you when it comes to areas that you wish to be assisted when it comes to tax matters. Otherwise, thank you so much for listening to us, and you have a blessed day.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That's the senior manager at KPMG, leading the customs and excise arm of the institution that is across the East African region. We have benefited greatly from your wealth of knowledge today, Josinita. Thank you so much. I want to now bring in Elle to also give her closing remarks. Elena, if you can hear us. Okay, even as we get thank you.
Thank you, Brenda. Just want to thank our taxpayers for listening in, asking these questions. I would want to thank our marketing department for organizing this. I think we should have more of this, especially one thing we didn't cover, some of the offenses that we find out there, but I mean something we can discuss in our next session. Just wanted to also inform our taxpayers that the enforcement department has moved from 17th floor of Times Tower. We are at Samia Business Park, Block C, first floor. So you can visit us with your inquiries. If again, if you're dealing with this powdered beer thing, kindly fireman, so they say. And I guess thank you, Josinita, also. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We can give them a hand clap. I don't know how you do this digitally. You can actually do that. Let's appreciate our panelists for the day. Elena, you have done a fantastic job. Same to Josinita. Yes, indeed, we may not have had enough time to cover the penalties, but we have more sessions coming up. I also, like Josinita, want to ask our taxpayers to keep watch on this space. We also have Tax Thursdays. What a coincidence, where we have trainings on various tax matters that affect you. So keep watch on our page. We have a KRA TV that is hosted on our KRA website. When you just go to KRA website, look for KRA TV, we will have a recording of this discussion that we have had today. This is in response to a question by one of our listeners asking whether we will make this recording available. Yes, it will be available on KRA TV. It is where we post every engagement that we have. Please make your way there and have a look at it. We were also live on our Facebook pages today. So thank you very much. I want to ask that if you have any further questions, you can direct them through our channels, that is on email, callcenter@kra.go.ke, on Twitter, it's at KRA Care, at Facebook should be Kenya Revenue Authority, and also you can get in touch with us on chat. We have a chat platform that is under Kenya Revenue Authority's website. Remember, KRA TV is also available. We have a section dealing with excise. You can drop your comments there and questions, and engage with us. We would love to hear from you and get to hear your comments. Now, I have been your moderator for the day. My name is Brenda Mutai from the Taxpayer Education Division in KRA. Appreciating all our attendees, our panelists. Let me wish you a very blessed day and also a great weekend ahead. Please feel free to leave at your pleasure. Thank you.
The recording has stopped.